Today we're diving into the art world with Rita Del Curto from the MTArt Agency, the first ever artist agency representing some of the most groundbreaking artists of our time. Their works are featured in museums, public installations, and cities worldwide. Highly sought after by collectors of all kinds, but they're not just backing today's stars, they're shaping the future Picassos, Chagalls, and Michelangelos of our time. I'm Jennifer Devine, your host. Please join me for a super inspirational glimpse into Rita's amazing and incredible world of art and her very non-linear Successfou story.
The artist has an incredible role to play in society.
For me, art is about passion. It's about discourse. It's about disagreement. It's about debate. You might love it. I might hate it. And art creates a space where we can share feelings and ideas.
Rita Del Curto, welcome to the Successful podcast.
I'm very happy to be here. Delighted to participate in this podcast and really share my story and hopefully inspire other people.
At 10, you wanted to be a doctor, like your uncle. And at 15, you still wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
But then you got to university and you were inspired by an aunt who was a diplomat.
Absolutely. So I think I grew up very values driven, wanted to help people, had this innate feeling of fighting for justice and fighting for right causes. So yes, indeed, when I was 10 and 15, was keen to be a doctor and help people. I had one of my uncles in Italy, interned with him 1 year, seeing his patients and being in the clinic with him. And then when I was applying for uni, one of my aunts, she had a very successful career as a diplomat and worked in Ethiopia, in Austria, Lebanon during the war in the early 80s. She was in also Burma, Rangoon, and really kind of inspired by her career. And so started university. I studied at Georgetown, my undergraduate, and then actually continued in that path and went back to Italy to do a master's in human rights and democratization in Venice. So very much committed to this career as a diplomat or working for some international organization. And when I started my career, I started off at the UN.
You were a United Nations officer.
I was a human rights officer at the UN in Kosovo, 2004. So obviously after the war, but there was still a peacekeeping mission there, 20,000 NATO troops. I was the youngest girl in the mission. Exciting times. We had 8-hour water cuts, 8-hour power cuts. Oftentimes there was curfews because there was some Serbian church being burned down or some shootout. So we didn't realize at the time that we were in, let's say, life-threatening situations. But my family was very nervous and was keen for me to come back. But I was very much committed and worked there for 2 years.
Wow, and so you came back because there was a family event and someone was unwell.
Exactly. So I was with the UN for 2 years in Kosovo, did some short-term missions, 2-3 months at a time, going to Venezuela, to Bolivia, to East Timor with the European Union as an election observer. And then my mum's husband at the time, he got ill, he had cancer. So I had to come back to Europe, be close to the family, and went to south of France to reassess my life, my goals, and my career trajectory.
Is that where home was?
Well, my mum was based in Spain at the time, and she had a second home in south of France. So I said, okay, I'm going to take some time off and rethink. I'm half Chilean, half Italian, and so I have family in South America and in Italy, but decided to go there to kind of reassess and look at my career trajectory and see what next steps I would be taking.
Oh, and then you decided to go into the yacht business in south of France, selling yachts or yacht experiences.
Exactly. So that was kind of inadvertently ended up in Monaco because my auntie, who the diplomat, she said, why don't you capitalize on the 5 languages that you speak and look for a job in Monaco? You know, I'm sure there's opportunities there that would enable me to stay in Europe close to the family. And inadvertently ended up working for a yacht broker as a charter assistant. So booking people's holidays, booking yachts, I mean, complete 180-degree different trajectory from human rights officer for the UN. But what that enabled me to do was really capitalize on my, let's say, interpersonal skills and let's say client relations and my communication skills and also business acumen, because I was always kind of a, let's say, very much a commercial or let's say entrepreneurial person. So that enabled me to kind of excel in that, and did that for about 5 years.
Did you ever get approached or consider being a spy, speaking 5 languages, and being so well traveled and being a UN officer?
Didn't get asked to be a spy, but considering I have 3 passports, could be an option. I'll keep my options open.
So how did you get the foot into the art world? How'd you go from there to the MTArt Agency? Like, when did you come to London?
Absolutely. So I moved to London now 15 years ago, and essentially when I pivoted in my career, I was very keen to kind of continue cultivating those client relations and capitalize on my business acumen, but really wanted to do something where I had more affinity. And whereas the yachts were interesting, I think I grew up in a family that was very much immersed in the arts. My mother has always painted. One of my aunties in Italy, she was a painter, and she organized art exhibitions around the world. And so I think I was fortunate having kind of grown up in an environment that very much appreciated the arts, and that it was something that was accessible for me. I wanted to pivot and go down that path. So having worked with, let's say, clients that very much also collect, I think that was an easy pivot, because a lot of the clients that I worked with, they were also collectors. They also, let's say, had homes in different places, maybe spent time in London or had businesses in London.
So these were the clients in the yacht business.
Exactly. So oftentimes, you'll see that collectors, whether they collect art or they invest in art, they also have a second home. They might also charter a yacht. So when I moved to London, I think that was kind of a natural, let's say, pivot or easy pivot, because I was dealing with the same types of clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I moved to London, my first job was working at Christie's, which was wonderful, on King Street.
What'd you do for them?
And did lots of things, but one thing that I really enjoyed at the beginning was doing telephone bidding. So again, capitalizing on my language skills, and oftentimes either at Christie's King Street or at the old South Kensington office, I was doing their bids, doing bids during the auctions. So would liaise with clients and bid for them. Bit nerve-wracking because you can't get the numbers wrong, right? But really exciting, and really kind of opened up a world of working in the art world. And from Christie's, let's say I transitioned and worked in many different aspects of the art world. Worked at Sotheby's, worked at the Serpentine Gallery, which is one of the leading, let's say, museum or gallery institutions that exhibits contemporary art.
Here in London.
In London, of course, in Hyde Park. And also worked doing private sales, which was exciting, again, with a lot of the same clients that I'd always dealt with, but maybe with a different hat on during my career. And then most recently, just over 3 years ago, joined MTArt Agency as their art sales director and also shareholder in the company.
And tell me who they are. I mean, I know who they are, but tell everyone who they are. You represent, so you're the first artist agency representing artists, and it's a woman-run agency.
Exactly.
And you have artists all over the world, incredible artists. I was looking at your portfolio last night. I was just in awe of some of the artists and the art that I'd never seen or even imagined. There's that part, I talk about this a lot, of my brain and everyone's brain. What we don't even know, we don't know.
Yeah.
And some of the art I saw, I didn't even know I didn't know. And now I know. Like David Popa.
Exactly. We are the first B Corp talent agency in the art world. You had talent agencies for models, actors, football players. Didn't exist for contemporary artists. And when you actually look at the art world, the numbers, it's quite interesting, because 70% of commercial galleries are not profitable. Of the 30% that are, a further 18% only make a profit margin of 20%. So that means you have 80% of commercial galleries making less than $200,000 a year, which is shocking. But at the same time, it makes sense considering they have all this expensive real estate in London, Hong Kong, New York, Paris, and one revenue stream, which is sales. So what we wanted to do was really create a business model that was very artist-centric. We also want to democratize art, and we want to build artists' careers. So we flipped the gallery model and are building up the artists' careers through 3 pillars, which is the public art, the brand collaborations, and the sales.
Tell the audience who's listening, what is democratizing art? What does that mean?
So I think a couple of things. I think first of all, the art world, as we know, is very white male dominated. It's very opaque. Only 10% of works of art in museum and gallery institutions are by women artists, and we're 51% of population. Black artists, 1%. Latinx, less than 1%.
Shocking.
So yes, the numbers are pretty dismal. And then when we look at also the institutions, there's very few, let's say, BIPOC or ethnic minority board members, museum directors, patrons, and even when you look at the collectors, interestingly enough, in the traditional art world, only 15% of collectors are women. At MTArt Agency, more than 50% of our collectors are women. So quite exciting. But in terms of democratizing, I think for us it means several things. One of the pillars of our business is public art. And that goes two ways. So on the one hand, it really means democratizing art and giving people like you and me iconic spaces to showcase their art. And of course, we've done this all over the world. So we have public art in London. We're London's leading provider of public art, working with Crown Estate and Knightsbridge Estate. But we've also done installations everywhere. So those who are not familiar with London, Crown manages £9 billion worth of property. So you can walk down Regent Street, see some of our installations, but we've done things also in Enfield, in Greenwich.
Tell me some of the locations where you've done installations and who are the artists who are installed there.
Absolutely. So I mean, we've done installations all over London. So we had Liz West in King's Cross most recently. That was installed in December. We had Asiko, British Nigerian artist, in Knightsbridge Corner. We had Stefania Teja, Colombian Paris-based artist, on Regent Street. But we've done it all over the world, Europe, Middle East, America, Asia. So we had, for example, Raven D. Clark, who's a Black British artist from Croydon, had 3 mega large-scale bronze sculptures installed in Montgomery, Alabama.
Incredible.
That was installed on Juneteenth, so a very historical day in the U.S. history. And she had 3 bronze sculptures placed alongside Simone Lee, who of course represented United States at the Venice Biennale 2 years ago.
And she was the first
African-American woman
ever represented at the Biennale.
Representing the United States.
States, okay.
Yes, so that was incredible. But when we look at public art figures, pretty daunting. So Raven, as I said, Black British artist from Croydon. And when you look at the numbers, there are more sculptures of Paddington Bear than there are of female artists. Not that I have anything against Paddington Bear. We love him, so does my daughter. But 97% of sculptures are of white men by white men. So to have this artist install 3 bronze permanent sculptures was pretty exciting. Also, in terms of her life, this project enabled her to get a mortgage and buy a house. So in terms of generational wealth, really empowering and exciting. And again, we've done this everywhere. So that's how we, let's say, democratize art for artists, giving them iconic locations, but also for the masses, for people to experience art, see it, and not just, let's say, Mayfair or Park Avenue, but also Enfield in Tooting, let's say places that are off the beaten track, to really democratize and give access to art.
It's amazing. So let's use Raven as an example. So you discovered Raven. Tell us that story about how you found her and what that journey was like.
Raven, interestingly enough, we started to follow her while she was still studying. She studied at Central St. Martin's, and she was doing incredible installations and sculptures. She was doing 3D digital printing before anybody was talking about 3D digital printing. So her practice from a conceptual perspective is very much focused on Black Lives Matters, visibility, invisibility, Black and brown body politics. But from a practice perspective, she was doing 3D digital printing. I mean, she started over 10 years ago, before anybody was really doing it. So she definitely caught our eye. On Instagram, we started following her, and it started with a conversation on Instagram. So that conversation led to meetings, studio tours, and then representation, and then ultimately some incredible projects that have ranged from a solo exhibition during Freeze last year, and major large-scale permanent public art installations.
So tell me about the artist in Chicago who's mixed AI with their art.
Absolutely. So their name is Ellie Pritz, and they actually, as you rightly stated, they have a condition in their hands which curtailed their painting career and also their musical career as a cellist. However, they pivoted and started to incorporate AI in their practice. So they're using AI and recursion to continue making art. So actually, it's a story of resilience, of overcoming obstacles. I find it incredibly inspiring. And they were named the #1 AI digital artist to follow last year by the Art newspaper, which is amazing.
How old are they?
And under 30, so quite exciting. And also, I mean, you mentioned price point, and what's wonderful about our portfolio of artists is that we represent emerging mid-career established artists. Works from £1,000 to upwards of several millions. So actually, you can get one of their pieces for about $1,000, which is, I think, quite accessible, considering that they had a solo show in a museum in Germany last year. Also was featured in a museum show last year in Alay, and recently sold a piece at auction at Christie's for over $200,000. So quite exciting.
Incredible.
And a wonderful, inspiring story.
And do you represent any middle-aged white men as well?
We have artists from all socio-ethnic background, all, let's say, ethnic backgrounds. They're based all over the world. So we do have white male artists. We do not discriminate in that sense. But we also have an incredible array of African artists, diaspora artists, Native American artists, Latinx artists, Asian artists, Middle Eastern artists. So really a wide range. And also that cover all types of medium. So sculptors, digital artists, painters, ceramic artists, and also photographers and multidisciplinary artists.
Incredible portfolio, actually. So the million-dollar question is this: how do you tell the difference between an emerging artist who's going to build a career and be very successful and have their art appreciate value, and just a very skilled artist with a lot of talent?
I think it's a question of whether they can make meaningful works of art from a conceptual perspective and also from a practice perspective that is somehow different, marking a watershed, or is really kind of breaking paradigms or pushing boundaries, but also has to do with who's representing them and how their career is being built. So I think in terms of our business model, we're really, I'll sell it to you, but we build them up through the public art, through the brand collaborations, and that's what it enables them to excel. And I think, when you have artists that not only do the public art, not only do the brand collaborations, but also have museum exhibitions, also are placed in important collections, are acquired by museums, I think that really helps to propel them to success, and that's what we're working very hard to do.
Yeah, you do a good job of it. Is it possible for an artist to represent themselves and to arrange public art displays and installations? And are there any artists doing that on their own without an agent?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely possible. I think what I would say is that having a talent agent that's helping you with the legals, with the contracts, it enables the artist to focus on what the artist is good at, which is making art, and allows the talent agency or the agent to really support them with contracts, with the legal, let's say, aspects and the financial aspects of deals. I think we've seen so many times, and I'm not going to name any names, but episodes where an artist's artwork was maybe sold twice, or where maybe the agreement between the artist and, let's say, the brand for a collaboration was not financially beneficial for the artist, or let's say public art installations that maybe the artist, made some money but could have made a lot more if they would have had somebody negotiating the deal on their behalf. I think what's great about having a talent agency for artists, and we were the first B Corp talent agency, but 30 other talent agencies have been created after us, which I find incredibly flattering because we want to break paradigms and push boundaries. And I think when you look at the numbers, knowing that 70% of commercial galleries are not profitable, I think there is a need in the art world to, let's say, open up and look for other models that are financially successful for the artist, but also are part of the art ecosystem. I think, people don't like to talk about the finance of art, but I think, you know, I think it's tragic that sometimes, in the past, artists had to cut off their ear or die before their art would increase in value. Yeah. I think we want to see artists that are successful during their career, during their lifetime. And so I think we have to let the artist focus on creating the art and have somebody else kind of promote the artist and really build their career, propelling them to success.
So if an artist is already in one of the commercial galleries, like a Maddox or a Clarendon, could they also get representation from an agency like yourselves?
Absolutely. So what's great about our business model is that although some artists are exclusive, so we represent them exclusively, we do have artists that are also represented by galleries. So I think we do have exclusivity in terms of some artists, but that's not the only option. So some artists can have gallery representation, which also enables them to exhibit in, let's say, the traditional white cube gallery that some artists want or desire.
And how does an artist go about getting you to represent them? And what does that application process look like? How many applications do you get monthly?
Yeah, great question. So it's a two-way street. We do receive about 200 applications per month. I don't choose them. There's a committee of collectors, of curators, of different people within the art ecosystem that are reviewing applications and help to, let's say, select the artists that we represent and that are part of our portfolio. But we also actively scout artists. So, there's one artist, for example, Zagove. He's obviously mega and respected and established within the art world. I walked up to him at the Saatchi Gallery at the exhibition that June Sarpong had curated last year. And I said, I love your work. I want to talk to you. We want to learn more about your practice. And a few months down the line, we started to represent him. And he's incredibly talented. He's currently exhibiting at the Tate Britain in the 1980s photography show. He also is opening an exhibition next week at the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, alongside another one of my artists, Delphine Diallo, a French-Senegalese photographer based in Brooklyn, New York. And he's also in an exhibition at the London Museum in the Docklands and is currently having a solo show at the Cam Museum in Spain. So quite exciting. And so it's a two-way street. We actively scout, but then they also come to us.
Okay, so that's sort of the artist sector. Now let's talk about investors. I've stumbled across your website. I've looked at your artists. I've seen some of the people you represent, and I love their art. How do I get in touch? Or if I don't know, how do I get in touch with an agency like yourselves on what to buy? Because I love a lot of the art, but I also would like something in our financial portfolio that potentially will go up in value.
Absolutely. You really nailed it. So there are, let's say on the buying side, there are collectors that love art, buy art, and collect at their home and to look at. And then there are the more, let's say, investor profiles or these more kind of corporate profiles. And you see, a lot of the, let's say, investor or the corporate art collections like JP Morgan, like Morgan Stanley, they're only acquiring works of art between $10,000 and $15,000. So they've completely changed their acquisition and curatorial strategy. They're only buying works really kind of at the low end of the market, really accessible prices, because they know that within a portfolio, there will be 3 or 4 stars that carry the weight of the portfolio. So I know a collector that she always tells the story how in the 1980s, she acquired a painting, a bunch of scribbles from a black man based in New York. People thought she was nuts because it was literally just a bunch of scribbles. Well, that guy was a genius. His name was Basquiat. And a few years ago, she sold that painting for over $40 million.
One painting.
Yes.
Wow.
So I think if you're an investor, I think you're trying to catch the artists while they're on the rise. Collectors, I always tell my collectors, buy what you like, right? And I think when you're collecting, there's let's say different approaches of curating the collection. You can, let's say, have a common thread, so you can collect works of art only by women artists. You can collect only photography pieces or painting, a sculpture. And personally, I think a collection that has a lot of texture, whether it's for your own personal collection or as an investment, I think that's more interesting. And what I mean by that is having pieces that are digital, painting, sculpture, photography, installations. I think that makes for a more interesting collection. But I think in terms of the advisory aspect of what we do, I work with all different types of collectors or investors or family offices or corporate art collections. And whilst some people charge for this advisory service, you know, I just work with people on a one-to-one basis. They come to me, they tell me what their objective is, and I advise them. I've placed some incredible pieces in large corporate art collections, also helped first-time buyers to acquire their first piece of art, and then helped savvy collectors to kind of, let's say, expand their existing collection of maybe blue chip art to include some exciting emerging artists.
What would you say to art students? They're in uni, they're studying art, they love art, they've been great at art their whole life. Is there anything they should be doing, looking at, working on, exploring to develop themselves
Absolutely.
for a career in art?
Absolutely. So I think if they're studying, I think one thing that they should consider is absolutely doing residency programs. I think artist residency programs, and you have all different types. You have institutional ones that will give you an institutional show after the residency program, but you also have, let's say, residency programs for emerging artists, might be in a hotel, might be in somebody's home, but you can literally Google search artist residency programs. There is a network called Triangle that my friend Antonio's running, and I think there's some incredible opportunities. Artist residency programs will often host the artists, pay for their living expenses and accommodation and food so that they can really focus on creating art. Some of these are indeed for, let's say, more emerging artists, so maybe students that have not exhibited in galleries or museums, but that enables them to kind of start producing work and consolidate their practice. So I think that's one piece of advice that I would definitely give to art students as they think of their career and how to secure gallery representation or how to become an artist. It's start by doing residency programs. There's lots of them on the internet. You can also go on different websites that kind of collate all the open calls, and I think that's a great place where to start.
And what about for the people who love art? They might have an art background, they know they don't want to be an artist, but they want to be an agent. They want to do what you do. What is that path? What does it look like? What would you recommend for them? What steps can they take?
Absolutely. So I think when they're thinking of their career, they have to think whether they want to be commercial, where it's really doing the transaction, selling the art, or whether it's more of a curatorial, let's say, route. So that you have to study art history and really kind of focus on the more, let's say, academic route. But I think whether you want to be an agent selling art or, let's say, doing public art projects, maybe for that path, I would suggest having more of a business background, doing an MBA, because that will really enable you and equip you with kind of the skill set for transacting and for working on deals that are financially successful.
Hi, it's Jennifer Devine, and you're listening to the Successfou podcast. Thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to me. If you're liking the content, let me know by hitting the like button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, and then you won't miss out on any future episodes. And if there's someone you think could benefit from this information or watching and listening and finding inspirational, please share it with them. Now, let's get back to the show. Who are your favorite historical artists?
There's so many, and they change, right? I think when I was very young, I love Caravaggio, but of course I also loved Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo, she's now considered, I think, after the sale at Sotheby's last year, she is the #1 female Latinx artist, like the highest sold after that auction last year at Sotheby's. But she was also self-taught, an autodidact, so she didn't go to art school. So I think...
What do you like about her? What do you like about her art?
Two things. I think the fact that she was an autodidact, I think that demonstrates that you don't have to go to art school. There's some incredible artists. I just went to the Francis Bacon exhibition. He was also self-taught. And I think that demonstrates that you don't have to go to art school to be an artist. And what I love about Frida Kahlo was that she reached global success, but was at the same time an outsider, because she never exhibited at the Venice Biennale until last year, which is when Adriano Pedrosa, who was the first curator at the Venice Biennale that was openly gay and also from the global south, or the global majority, as now people are calling it, because he's Brazilian born and based. But he included for the very first time artists that had already died, because normally the Venice Biennale only includes living artists. And he exhibited artists such as Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, who during their lifetime had never exhibited at the Venice Biennale, which I think is tragic, but also this decision to exhibit them at the world's leading art fair, which is not commercial, but where you see kind of the new trends in the art world, was really exciting and wonderful.
So the Venice Biennale is where they have emerging artists.
Sometimes emerging artists, but also they can be established artists, but it's really where you see kind of the new trends, and it's by and large always been contemporary artists. So each country will have a pavilion, and that is where the countries kind of select an artist, contemporary artist, living artist, to demonstrate or to represent what's the latest trend or what is their focus. So for example, last year you had John Okonfor representing the UK, which was very exciting, but also you had Gibson representing the United States, who was the first Native American representing the US at the Venice Biennale.
Who are these people selecting the artists?
Each country will have their committee, but it's really, I think, in the end, it is us that select them, because we acquire them, we support them, we go to their exhibitions. So I think whereas there are committees that select the artists, it's also people, our values. 2 years ago, you had Simone Lee, who was the first African-American artist, female artist, to represent United States. And I think that's very much a reflection of what people want to see. We want to see art that resonates with us.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about, you were talking about there's a lot of nepotism in the art world. It's very middle-aged, white male dominated. Has been since the beginning of art time.
Yeah, I think by and large, the art world has been dominated by what I call dead white men. So the Picassos, the Chagall, the Rothko, which are incredible artists. We all love them. But I think that when you look at the largest growing demographics of collectors, which are millennials, that's kind of my age group, so 44 and below, they don't care about Rothko, they don't care about Picasso, they care about LGBTQIA+, they care about ecology, sustainability, female artists, digital art. And I think that because they are so values driven, that's one of the reasons why when we founded the company 10 years ago, we were keen to create a company that was B Corp. One, because that resonates with us and it's very much reflective of our values, but also resonates with our collectors because they are very values driven.
I want to ask you about NFTs. Actually, I think it's the Chicago artist
Okay.
who it was mentioned sold NFT art.
Absolutely. So NFT art, basically the NFTs, they're recorded on the blockchain, which help to certify their authenticity and enable them not to be fungible or copied. So it actually assures authenticity, which I think is great. Something else that's also great about NFTs is that it is written in the blockchain that they will get resale rights. So historically, when a work of art was bought and sold, the artist, if he or she was living, would not receive what we nowadays call resale rights, right? So every time nowadays something is sold, they will get, I think it might be 7% of the sale price. That is a law nowadays that exists that enables them to make money when a piece is sold on the secondary market. So you would have works of art, let's say Gerhard Richter was selling works of art in the millions, right, on the secondary market, and he wasn't making anything. And then recently they promulgated a law, that's the resale right law, that actually every time a work of art is sold, if the artist is living, he or she will get a certain percentage. They do get resale rights, which is wonderful. And for NFT art, that is written in the blockchain, ensuring that the artist will receive something when that's bought and sold. We do have many artists that create NFTs. And I think whereas there was a correction in the market recently and there was a dip also with regards to Bitcoin, I think now it's kind of back on the rise and there's lots of opportunities. I mean, our artist Léo Caillard, who's a French sculptor based in Paris, he just installed a mega permanent public art installation in La Défense. So if you're in Paris, check it out. It is the equivalent of the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square. So he has this mega installation there, which is stunning. But he does photography, sculpture, and also produces NFTs. And he's one of the leading NFT artists in the world.
Oh, what? And remind me, what's his name?
Léo Caillard.
Léo Caillard.
Yeah, so he's exhibited at the Louvre, at the Dali Museum, had a mega museum show last year during the Summer Olympics, and very much trying to build a bridge between antiquities and modern day.
How do you think AI is going to change the art world for artists, for buyers, for installations?
Yeah, I think I see AI as a facilitator. I think a lot of people are scared of AI, but my husband, for example, he has an AI fintech startup, right? So he's very much a proponent of AI and was a keynote speaker talking about it at the World Finance Forum last year in New York. So I very much support AI when we think of our artist Ellie Pritz and how AI enabled them to continue producing art and now they are exhibited in museums. I think that's really exciting how AI and recursion can facilitate their practice and further their practice. And I think in terms of jobs, I think that there's going to be, let's say, new jobs created and also it will make things easier. I mean, to be honest, I feel like such a dinosaur when I'm using like social media, right? And sadly, we have to constantly post and communicate. And so actually, I use chatgpt all the time to draft things when I'm drafting a pitch or writing a letter. Sometimes that just, let's say, makes the language a bit smoother and helps me to kind of condense information. So I see AI as a facilitator. When you look at images and image creation, more images will be created by AI by 2050, which I think is tragic because I want to see artists creating works of art, right? If they use AI as a tool, I think that's great, but we want to see artists creating art and images because I think that's what inspires us. When we look at scientists, and actually my colleague, Marine Tanguy, who's the CEO and founder of MTArt, she just published a book with Penguin called The Visual Detox. Actually, when you look at social media and you're looking at advertising, it makes you feel, let's say, inadequate and makes you feel depressed. And that's why you feel the need to consume because you have to buy this to be skinnier, do that to be prettier. And whereas when you look at art, we've actually commissioned many scientific studies and work with universities to demonstrate that art actually improves your mental health. It's actually stimulating the front part of the brain, which is making happy hormones. So it's making endorphins, making you happy. And we actually, one of the public art installations that we did was right after the London terrorist attacks about, when was that, 10 years ago, where the next day they erected bollards across the city. And what we did is we worked with London Transport to wrap art installations around the bollards, because obviously you see these cement bollards coming up and that's quite violent and it reminds you of the terrorist attacks. But we wrapped art around it because it's been demonstrated by scientific studies that art inspires you. Chrome therapy, color therapy, it inspires you, it makes you happy. And I think that's what we want to see more of, more art in public spaces, in advertising, in our daily life.
Which was the bollards?
That was Jennifer Abeceda.
Being a minority in any dominated field by something that isn't you, there's always going to be challenges. What are some of the challenges that you've faced, or perceptions, or anything else? And how did you overcome them?
I was very fortunate to have wonderful role models, very strong women that raised me. So my father died when I was young, and being raised by my mother, who had to be a mother and a father to me, she worked very hard. And I think that really demonstrated, one, the necessity to be resilient, but also she inculcated in me a work ethic that really has followed me throughout my career. I'm not a 9-to-5 person. People know that they can always reach me on my phone, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, by email. I'm always available. And I think that being resilient, having that role model of a hardworking person, really kind of forged my character to be strong. And I think that's what you have to be when we're in such a male-dominated society, number one. And I think pick and choosing your battles also. I think a lot of times I just let things slide off my back. Things don't faze me. I recall being in many dire situations and just laughing.
Give me an example
in that moment. There was a work of art that was sold and it had been temporarily lost. In that moment, it seemed like very grave. And, nowadays with barcodes, with tracking systems, things aren't lost. They might be temporarily lost, but I think it's, just taking things with stride and just tracking down the artwork, calming down the collector, assuring him that his artwork was not lost. We were just in the process of tracking it down, which we did. And I think it's learning to not take situations or yourself too seriously. I think number one, so being able to laugh or relax when everything seems dire or lost. Resilience. And then the other thing I would say is just our fighting for causes, or for a cause, which I feel in my job, it's really come full circle, right? Because whereas my job is very commercial and I'm very much about selling art, placing art in collections, so quite transactional. At the same time, I'm incredibly fulfilled because we do a lot of public art. So in a way, it's almost come full circle because we are democratizing art. We are giving people access to art. And I think that when you live in a democracy, you have access to art and to conversations. Because for me, art is about passion. It's about discourse. It's about disagreement. It's about debate. You might love it. I might hate it. And art creates a space where we can share feelings and ideas. And we try to create, in democracies, I feel that we try to create safe spaces for radical ideas, right? As we fight for this, or as I fight for this, or as I work to support artists with radical ideas and kind of, let's say, ascend or progress my career, I always look back and try to pull somebody up with me. I think we, as you stated, we live in a very male dominated society. You see that in banking and finance. You also see that in the luxury sector. I'm a judge on a panel for the Diversity and Luxury Awards, which is headed up by Elizabeth Solado, who's an incredible woman who started this initiative 2 years ago. And I gave an award to an artist, Derek Boateng, who's from Ghana, based in Accra, for the best artistic collaboration with a brand that was with the British Fashion Council under the artistic direction of Edward Enninful, who was the first Black British editor of Vogue, and incredible collaboration, which people can check out on Instagram. But what I'll say is when you look at luxury sector, very much like finance or like the art world, only 14% of creative directors of luxury brands across America and across Europe are women. Only 14%, only 1% are a minority, and never has a Black woman headed up a major fashion brand. And of course, Grace Wells Bonner, she had her brand, but I'm referring to the mega design brands. So, we have to help each other. I'm very much a woman that supports other women.
Definitely.
And helping women to be successful and to support them.
Yeah, I love that. And have you had a lot of women who have done the same for you?
Absolutely. I mean, my company is female founded, female led. Marine, she's another woman that champions women. I think she just champions successful people in general. I've been fortunate to meet some incredible women and incredible collectors, and they are in their own fields very much championing other women, and I think helping each other, which is wonderful because it's tough, right? And we want to feel that we're supported by like-minded people.
Yeah, there's a team out there. And I think your thinking on that is really important.
Absolutely. And I also think that by being a woman that champions other women, we shouldn't exclude men. Because I know some wonderful allies, whether they're artists or collectors or just friends, that they're men and they champion successful women and strong women. Asiko, my British Nigerian artist, he's a photographer and multidisciplinary artist. He is celebrating this empowered African woman, but he's a man and he's very much an ally celebrating that and celebrating strong women.
I love that. One thing I want to get out of these interviews is when there is obstacles, because not everything is amazing. And successful people have to deal with the same stuff people who aren't as successful do.
Yeah.
And how do they overcome that opposition? What is the real template that they're using and operating on to get them through? Because it happens for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we have to remind ourselves, like those bad moments. Nobody ever learned anything having a perfect life. You only learn through obstacles. There's that phrase in Latin, per aspera ad astra, which is through difficulty, reach for the stars, which it's through those obstacles that we learn things. And through obstacles, we rise to the challenge and overcome difficulties. So I think it's reminding ourselves and really communicating that, keeping it real.
Yeah.
Because I think as I said, in this kind of instant gratification, perfect Instagrammed life, we think that everything's perfect and it's not. It's riddled with difficulties and trials and tribulations. And I think that's what needs to be communicated so that people are inspired and don't give up.
This has been so inspirational.
Really?
And you shared so much knowledge. You've touched
Wonderful.
such a big part of that pie of what I didn't even know I didn't know. And thank you so much for coming on the Successful podcast. It has been such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the listeners. I think we each have a story to tell. And I think these stories can hopefully inspire and empower and hopefully push people to do great things.
Thank you. This has
Thank
been so
you.
good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Successfou podcast. Every story I share is a reminder that success isn't handed out. It's built by people who are brave enough to dream and bold enough to follow that dream. People who keep going, who learn and keep learning, and who lead with the heart. If something in this episode sparks something in you, pass it on to someone you care about. I'm Jennifer Devine, And I'll be back next week with more real stories and real tools and templates of success, real conversations to help you build the life you're here to live. Thanks for joining me.